right. We're here with Stephen, who is a data visualization expert, and would love to hear from you, Stephen, a little bit about what your philosophy is on data visualization to start. And then I'm going to stop saying data visualization over and over because it's a long phrase.
Well, yeah, it's great to be here. Like I was saying earlier, I see it as the medium in which, you should be talking to clients, you should be talking to your coworkers, you should be talking to anybody. I hate tables as much as literally anybody, and digital marketing in general, when you're presenting information, you're discussing performance, you're looking at a bunch of different things. It can become very tedious, for you guys involved and for those that you're talking to. And I think any chance you get to simplify something, use a symbol. I was talking earlier, street signs, directions. If you're watching sports, they're very good at visualization to say, look at this, look at that. I think all of those are very, very interesting. It's ease of communication. We learned how to use symbols before we learned how to use language. So I think that's something that transcends communication, just anything. So that's my personal crusade, is doing everything I can to make the flow of information easier and more easily understood.
I love that it's a crusade, but I also love that you're taking inspiration from the real world, which is not something we always do as digital focused marketers. So I appreciate that. What are your kind of thoughts on aesthetics versus the substance of a visualization?
I'd say substance first, aesthetics second, because you want to make sure it's right. It's okay if it looks good, but you want to make sure that it looks right, that the information is correct. And then I usually come back either later in the day, take a little bit of break after I've got it, then see what it says to me. I think that's some good advice I've gotten. When it comes to anything, just give yourself, see if you understand it first, and then you get to pretty it up and add some nice pictures, and then add the little symbols and everything that touch it up. So that's kind of my thing. Again, I like to sift through the data, see if I understand it, and then I'll add a couple different tabs, versions, see which one sounds right, and then I'll look, and then usually end up with a finished product. So that's kind of my process.
Yeah. Janelle, I know you've been working with a lot of data lately. Do you have anything to add, or any challenges that you would bring up in this space?
Well, I guess the question that I would ask Stephen, and we can't have a podcast or a conversation about data visualizations without talking about pie charts and pie. And what are your thoughts on when do you use a pie and what makes it effective or not?
So that's a great question. I think it's more so about when you're trying to find out, again, maybe to simplify it a little bit, you're just trying to understand allocations. Because you're looking at, that's one metric essentially. We have a bit of a philosophy. If you use two, the scatter plots are great. You can mix a column chart and that. But I think pie charts, a lot of it's especially from a financial perspective. What is your investment portfolio look like? What are you spending on campaigns, different media channels, tactics? And then from there, you can compare two pie charts together. What will we spend in APAC or EMEA versus this year? I think it's very useful for showing just the spread, I guess, and then from there you can kind of take it and look at it a bunch of different things. So there's definitely a bunch of different ways. And I know it's ironic we're talking about visualization on an audio podcast, but there's actually no visualization. We're trying to talk about something that's inherently visual. So, but even then, I think we're kind of finding our way back to our point. So that's my thought.
Just for everybody who's listening, pies are one of my favorite things to talk to people about, because everybody's got philosophies and approaches. There's the never pie crowd. And it's just, it's a fun hot button for me to try to press.
I'm a big donut fan. I don't know about the pie so much, but I like a donut. Janelle's like, no, that's not.
I personally, for me, scatter plots are my absolute favorite of all time. Big scatter plot fan, always have been, and I think I always will. Until something new comes up, maybe the 3D version of a scatter plot.
Oh, good Lord. That's going to rank on those worst charts.
I was going to say, maybe Excel did that about 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I don't understand the 3Dification of some charts when it's unnecessary. You know what I mean? When it's
Yeah,
unnecessary.
that's an
Yeah.
important topic too, because when is the question is, when is too much? What is too much
Yeah.
data? And I sometimes find myself doing that. I'll try to, sometimes it's a personal challenge, how many metrics I can pull into one. And sometimes once you get past three, every time you show up, they're like, well, what is that? Like, what am I looking
Yeah.
at? And then I end up spending more time explaining it than I could have just wrote it out in data. And at that point, you're in a giant full circle. You're back where you started. So a lot of it is, I would say, peer feedback, peer review is the best way to start. Send it to people on your team. Does this make sense to you? Have I gone too far? Have I stepped beyond the threshold of understanding? That's kind of the way that I think about it. But always shoot for the moon. And the best thing is, like I said, have multiple drafts. So you can always work your way back. You go as far as you can and say, all right, I don't even understand this anymore. And then you kind of stop halfway through. This is a good medium. So that's kind of the way I think about it.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm familiar with a lot of your work, Stephen. And I think one of the things that I've always been really impressed by is how you're able to differentiate between data visualizations that you're creating to explore data versus data visualizations that you use in order to try to communicate a message and to use as a tool for persuasion. To say, here's what we found, here's what we've done, and here's what we recommend. And even with scatter plots, they can be the same visualization, but how you decide to format them and what you put on them can change how they're used and how they're interpreted in, I find, really meaningful ways.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. And again, anytime anybody on the team or somebody else, they understand it, they get the point, or they appreciate the work. That's really what it's all about. Because there's a million things that we talk through with clients and all the time, and I think that's a good point of validation. Like, oh, I got my message across, and they appreciate bonus points.
Yeah.
So that's awesome to hear.
Awesome. So maybe to sum up, what are the top 3 rules you have for anyone approaching data to visualize it?
Interesting. So I would say, first, what am I looking at? Are we looking at, and I say, like, pick the KPIs, pick the things that you want to compare. Is it time? Are you comparing an allocation? Is there a map involved? Is geography? Because that's a whole different angle. Are you comparing something? Is, pre, post, think to yourself out loud. What is the goal that I'm trying to get? Am I comparing my allocations last year to this year? Then I can look at 2 pie charts. Are we comparing 3 things? So spend versus, lead production, and then, how many of those turn into sales? So that's like 3, and again, because we're trying to understand a data set, we're trying to understand a client's portfolio better. And, and then obviously colors is like the best thing, good versus bad, time changes, shades, different colors. So I think that's the most important thing, because that I have a whole methodology of what type of chart to use based on what you're looking at. So I think that's probably the first thing. And, I said we have a pretty good idea of what chart to use in that case. But, it's good to write it out too. That's like the best advice I've heard all the time. What's the question? To the scientific method, whatever, the hypothesis and all that. What am I trying to get? And what information do I need? What 1, 2, 3 or metrics are involved? So that's boiled down in a nutshell if I had to explain it that way.
Nice. Yeah. I was thinking about colors, but I didn't want to go down a rabbit hole. I took color theory in college.
Yep.
I went to art school. So
Yep.
I have a lot of personal opinions on colors. But that is so critical to the charts and understanding and even, in cases of accessibility, I've had clients who are colorblind or
Right.
or they're just, they prefer to print things out and don't have a color printer for one example. So to be careful with those things too.
Yeah, people react to that. Red is bad, green is good, orange is
That's
in
right.
the middle somewhere. But
It's emotional.
And sometimes it always helps to have a grayscale just in case. That's a very good point. Something I don't even think about is, because there's very different types of colorblindness. Some colors show up more than others, and you could be showing something that looks exactly. You could send them a pie chart that's all the same color.
Right.
So
how frustrating.
That's fair. Yep.
Great. Janelle, anything else on closing thoughts?
No, I think you guys covered everything.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Stephen, so much for your insight today, and we'll be back next time.
Awesome. Thank you guys very much. This is awesome. See you next time.
Take care.